So I'm going to talk about using the impact module in Pure. This was driven for us by the National Engagement and Impact Submission, the very first one that we've had in Australia, which occurred in 2018. So our engagement and impact submission, and I'm just going to focus on the impact part of it, we had to report on all these things. But the most important things that we were assessed on are in red, which was the impact narrative around the case study and the approach to impact from the institution. So this was how had the institution helped facilitate the impact. So we wanted to know, could we get this information in Pure? And if we were going to get it from Pure, where would we get it from? So in the impact module, this is where we thought we'd be able to get the impact, some of that information from. But the red box indicates that these were all custom fields that we added into the impact module at Monash. Again, we can get researchers to put in an impact summary and their beneficiaries, perhaps write a small narrative. And again, we added in 2 additional free text boxes for researchers to try and capture the countries of impact, and we labelled our box for approach to impact institutional support because we thought that made more sense to researchers. Relations in Pure are really excellent, so you can relate your impact records back to your associated research, your projects, your activities, any press media coverage, but there's no narrative around that, so you have to look at your relations and construct your own narrative. We added in a couple of extra impact categories that we thought might be relevant for our researchers. We added in some roles and we changed the impact levels to reflect what we were being asked to report on by the government. And I just guess for those of you who are using the impact module, the impact levels are only available if you implement the extended impact module. So what were we missing? So in red is what we were missing that we couldn't get out of Pure for our submission. But I think in orange, the associated research and additional information that we were required to report are not actually very well captured in Pure either. So we looked to whether we could use parts of the ref module, because also having to report on impact, we thought, well, maybe we could use the ref module as part of, we could say to Elsevier, repurpose that for us. So really what we'd be interested in is the Ref 3 part of the impact case studies and its impact underpinning researchers, references and evidence, and also the institutional statement. This was a screenshot, because obviously being in Australia, I don't have access to the Ref module. So this is a screenshot provided by one of my UK colleagues about what the Ref module actually looks like. And it's quite basic. It's a lot actually more basic than I thought it would be, and looks quite a lot like what we had to submit for our government submission, which was basically fill in a few boxes and upload your narrative. So this is what we see as the problems with the current impact module. There's no draft mode for researchers to add or edit impacts as they progress. The same template there's only one template, so you've got to use the same template for everything, for your impacts that are still in progress and still being matured, and things that have been completed. And then how do you differentiate if you only want to display completed or mature impacts on your portal? There's no facility for impact planning. There's no ability to add milestones or prompts for updates to the record. There's no ability to add or create timelines as to how the impact occurs over time. And some of our researchers said, well, I do different parts of I do different sections of impact or different types of impact, and I can't record that. So perhaps we need to think about a new impact module. So what I'm proposing, and I'm interested in positive or negative feedback from all areas of the international community, because obviously this is based on my limited Australian experience. So happy to receive all comments. But what I envisage is 3, maybe more, impact templates that link to one another in a similar way to the current awards management workflow, where you have an application and then an award and then a project. So my model encompasses 3 templates, which are based on planning, progress, and being ready for publication. So planning would think about things at the start of the project, when the award was granted or when the project commences. Things like identifying stakeholders, what possible impacts could come out of this, how am I going to capture impact and how am I going to measure it? Being able to record the current status of the problem. Still doing the kind of administrative things that we need, so recording keywords, field of research codes, socioeconomic codes, uploading any files or documents, and I would encourage creating a relation to the project record in Pure and to create maybe an impact plan or a communications plan. And you could really do this using the current template. I've added in kind of a few different free text boxes that would prompt the researcher to think about how are you going to identify if the impact occurred, what's the current status quo you're trying to change, how are you going to measure your changes. So then the impact in progress record should be able to be created from a planning record if a planning record exists and to populate the data, just like happens when you're going from an application to an award. And in this record, you record your activities that are contributing to your impact. You record changes in measurements. So I've got an example kind of related to the World Mosquito Program. They're all fictitious examples that I made up, but the World Mosquito Program is a large program that Monash is involved in to eliminate dengue. You can add and edit stakeholders and add new impacts if new impacts have emerged. Talk about your institutional support, create and record your evidence of impact, and continue to make those relations to outputs that come out of your work, to press media coverage, to activities, to prizes. So again, you know, the text can be brought over from the current record and should be able to be edited, and you should be able to add additional categories, additional maybe impact levels, or change the impact level. So in the current impact module, there's an evidence section. And what I'm proposing is creation of a similar kind of pop-out section, similar to evidence, where researchers can log impact progress. So I've called it an impact event. And basically the idea is to record an event that has occurred that's contributed to the impact. So you capture the event date, the title, what occurred, and any evidence. So in my example, I've recorded a time period that the mosquito was released, and you know that they released 10 million mosquitoes at 6 different sites. And perhaps the document is being able to, the approval documents for the release, any media coverage that accompanied the release. And then in 6 months' time, you can go back and you can say, okay, so what's the evidence of dengue fever after we released our mosquitoes? And you can link that back to the event and say, well, this event has contributed to a reduction in dengue fever. And then finally, you'd have your impacts for publication. So again, this could be linked to an impact in progress record, and the data is populated. And we'd need to think about kind of what kind of data would be displayed on the portal. So currently, if you have the impact module with a portal display, you get the title, you get who is affected, countries, description, participants, keywords, relations, and you also get date, level, and category. So you could think about what kinds of things you wanted to display on your portal. Monash currently doesn't display any impacts on its portal because of the way that we've instructed our researchers to use it, and I'll go into that in a minute. So we decided to use the impact module in Pure largely because we had it and we needed to have something, and it was a start. So initially, about 12 months ago now, we conducted a trial with a guide with a small group of researchers, and we got some good feedback about that. It was good that we were addressing this issue, that researchers did need a place to record their impact, but that basically you weren't going to be able to do it without the guide. They wanted further definition and examples, particularly about the difference between engagement and impact. What was engagement and what was actual impact? What type of evidence did they need to collect? What kind of title should I have? Who should my participants be? And I think that comes back to this morning, where how specific should your participants be? Is it just people in the community, or should it be a lot more specific than that? How often should we update the record? Should entries be deleted later if no impact occurred? What about negative impacts? Are the impacts going to be displayed on the portal? So we addressed the feedback by expanding our How Do I guide and providing further definitions and examples. And we actually used examples that we had submitted in our initial government assessment to show people that this is what we submitted and these are the kinds of things that we'd be looking for. We provided suggestions for prompts for updating, but we'd really like milestones on the impact record to prompt people to think about how their work's going. And as I said, we don't have impact displayed on our portal at the moment because we encourage our researchers to use it as a bit of a brain dump as they go along. So perhaps every year when you have to do your financial acquittal for your grant, you also think about if impacts occurred and you update your impact record and you just use dot points or whatever else and brain dump into there for later on. So we promoted it through a series of roadshows out to researcher groups. So basically we said to anyone from an individual research group through to a department, through to a school, to a faculty, we will come and we will talk to you about impact and the impact module whenever you want to however many people you want. So currently we have 53 impact records in Pure, which for an institution of Monash's size is not really very many. Business and economics have been the most engaged. We've got 17 records from there, 10 from arts and 10 from medicine, nursing and health sciences, and then a few from scattered around elsewhere. So that is it from me.
All right, so you have a road plan for what we should be doing, Tanya, right?
Pretty much.
That has to bring out some comments from you guys, right?
Hi, my name is Juri Pot. I'm from the Vrije Universiteit in Amsterdam. I was wondering, in your example of the mosquito program, you're basically saying that the intervention that you did has created impact, but how do you know that intervention was the cause of the impact?
Well, as I said, all my examples were fictitious, but the World Mosquito Program actually reported a few weeks ago that they've pretty much eliminated dengue fever in far northern Queensland in Australia. So what the program is about is the release of mosquitoes that won't carry dengue and that they go into the population and eliminate.
I get that, but so is there any curation of the impact that researchers themselves input into Pure and then say, well, this is the impact that my research has had?
I guess, well, not at the moment, because we don't currently have any workflow on the impacts, and that's something that we need to have. And I guess it's about, sometimes with impact, you can't do direct cause and effect. Like, you can't say that those mosquitoes have definitely led to a reduction in dengue. So I take your point, but I'm really not sure, that's more for the researchers than for me. I guess my talk focuses on about how we can better capture it and administrate it.
Hi, just a quick question. A lot of the functionality you're talking about there, I think we use by linking our activities to impact, and that gives us that ability and that extra functionality already within that. Was that something that you consider, or were you really just looking at having something standalone as impact? Because what we don't want to try and do is to have more duplication for our academics. If they're already putting something in as an activity, would we be better looking at having within the activities module a way of capturing that actually this is impact related rather than having another whole section?
No, definitely. So we kind of advise our researchers that activities are more related to engagement, and definitely any activities that are related to causing impact should be linked using the relations module. I guess my idea was more about the fact that the module in its current form doesn't allow for kind of the planning aspect of impact and the publication aspect of impact. And so I felt that by expanding it out into the 3 areas, you can facilitate that planning that researchers are now being asked to consider a lot more, and you can facilitate the publication and promotion aspect of it that, as I said, as a university, we don't currently do because of the way things look on the portal. So I actually did a quick look about people use, so we have just the standard portal. There are a couple of other Australian institutions and people who display impact, but basically that was what I found. So there's not really very many institutions who are perhaps displaying their impact on the portal, and when you click into them, some of them look excellent, some of them have a fully fledged narrative, and some of them are very brief.
Question or comment over here?
Thanks, very interesting presentation. Paul White from the Tells on Kids Institute. Just interested in following up from Andreas's thoughts this morning on impact being more of a journey than a destination. What are your thoughts on sort of dynamically mapping impact across time and whether you're getting there even if you haven't achieved the full impact?
I agree with the sentiment. Obviously, at some point, either from an institutional publicity point of view or a funder reporting point of view or a government reporting point of view, you will want to publicise where you're at. So I don't think being only partial of the way there should stop you publicising where you're at. I think it's just having the ability to curate what you're choosing to publish and then the ability to keep adding to the story as you go on. We don't know what's going to happen with our next engagement and impact assessment, whether we'll be able to submit the same case studies and define how much further they've gone and how much further that will have to be, or whether we'll have to submit totally new case studies for our next assessment.
All right. Any other questions or comments, please?
So I only use, do you have the standard portal? Okay. No, that's fine. I tried to go with people who had portals that looked like ours, because when I was discussing with Elsevier about what would appear on our portal, I used, I think it was Manchester as an example, and they said to me, oh, Manchester have a custom portal, so yours will not look like that. You can't configure fields like they've configured fields. So I tried to find people with portals that looked like ours.
Yes.
What's the underlying rationale for having impact? Is it something you would like to just to demonstrate to the world, this is how we generate impact, or is it for assessment purposes, or?
I think it's both. So for obviously the driver for Monash was the assessment, because what we found in the initial assessment was that we were relying on basically people's corporate knowledge. We had no tracked record of what impact projects had had. We had no evidence. We had no... The big one for us was institutional support. We'd had a very big change in our senior management team, and so we had actually no idea of how these people had been supported by the institution to achieve their impact. So for us, that was the primary driver, but I think the promotions driver for an institution is just as big. The publicity driver, the we're doing good things driver, we're engaging with you, all that.
Ethically, I see a lot of issues with recording impact the way you want it to do, but I think there's a big discussion.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No worries.
Still time for a couple of questions or comments, if anybody. Yes, Anna?
Hi, so we were the one with the 4 impacts from University of Southern Denmark. I think it would be good to form an international user group on this, because I think it's also funder driven from our perspective. So I think we have to deal with it, whether or not we like it. So, so maybe, Morten, you could arrange something, or?
Thank you. I just think I got a job there. Thank you. Certainly. Any other comments or questions? Still a little bit of time? Not the case. So put your hands together for Tanya while I present some Danish